Hey guys, Lucky Larry here, down here at K&L Machine and Welding, and today we're gonna be rebuilding a Dana 300 transfer case. So with that, let's get started. The first thing we have to do is drop the oil out of it. Now I've got a drain pan set up over here underneath of my table, and I've got just enough of the transfer case hanging off that I can get to the drain screw, and going to take that out, tip it up, drain the oil out of it as best we can. Had just a small amount of material on the magnet. No big deal. Let's go ahead and tip this thing up. Get as much as we can out of it. Doing this job. My dog Hank here thought he might want to stick his nose in that oil. Okay, so that has the oil dropped out of it. Put a plug back in. For those of you who may be looking at rebuilding a Dana 18 or a Dana 20, essentially it's the identical same transfer case. The only difference, the major difference, I won't say the only difference because I don't know for certain, the major difference of those is that the Dana 300 has helical cut gears which run a lot quieter in low range, as opposed to the Dana 18 and Dana 20. Both have helical cut gears in high range, but in low range you have like a spur gear, a straight cut gear, and they're an extremely noisy gear. So that's your difference. Other than that, like I say, essentially if you can rebuild any one of these, you can rebuild all of them. Okay guys, we're going to start off by pulling this piece here. Reason being, this isn't actually part of the transfer case, this is actually part of the transmission. We'll get us a soft face mallet, a couple of bumps, and there we go. Okay, and like I say, this is nothing more than an adapter housing. You do have your rear transmission seal here, the output shaft seal. Okay, so now we are down into the actual transfer case. Now the reason, of course, that we're doing this is because we have a very worn input shaft here that we're replacing, and while we're at it, we're going to go ahead and freshen up the whole transfer case. Also guys, one more thing that I would like to impress upon you is when you're doing this, get you some of these Ziploc bags to put your parts in. That way, as you take something like this off, okay, you can label your bag transmission to transfer case adapter, or whatever, how you want to label it. Put your fasteners in it, and that way you're not guessing later on down the road. Another good idea to do here is to, if you don't know exactly whether these are interchangeable, just mark them. Okay, now I really don't know. I'm not absolutely certain, so we're going to take our little pencil grinder. We're going to put F on this one for front, and an R on this one for rear. Now we're going to hook up our impact wrench and bring this one out. I have a puller here that I built just special for this some time ago. Give me just a second, I'll get the clamps put on and we'll pull. It's kind of handy. As you can see, once you get it started, it comes out fairly easily. Well, guys, I realize this seems like a big pain in the butt to go through all this just to pull a drive shaft yoke. You know, putting all these screws in and everything, but this assures that you have a good square pull on this yoke, that it's pulling out straight, that you're not cocking it and putting it in any kind of a bind. This way it pulls out exactly as it should, so nothing gets damaged. Plus, it just makes the job easier. I mean, look how easy that goes. Okay, guys, I'm going to give you a look here. Nothing really unexpected here. This transfer case actually looks really good inside. We're going to go ahead and put new bearings and seals in it, but no real surprises here. These old gear drive transfer cases are they're about bulletproof. Okay, guys, now all we did there is we just removed, you got a couple of ID plates here, which you definitely want to keep track of. And the big thing that we've done there is we removed this little retainer for the intermediate shaft. And we'll put all that in a baggie now. Okay, guys, now I'm certain maybe there may be a better way to do this, but we're doing it with what we have to work with. So what we're using here is we're going to use a brass drift. Do not use any kind of steel on these. I realize some guys do, some guys get away with it. It's just the wrong thing to do, fellas. Use a brass drift so that you don't damage anything, and you start driving that intermediate shaft out. Okay? Alright, we've got it started. Now you're gonna hear all kinds of parts falling to the bottom of the case. Don't worry about it. All it is the rollers for that intermediate gear. We'll pick them out later. If you're doing a complete rebuild, you're probably going to get new rollers with your rebuild kit. Actually, you're probably also going to get a new intermediate shaft. Do you absolutely have to have it? Well, it all depends. Now, this intermediate shaft here looks excellent. it really wouldn't have to be changed, but we're going to change it anyways because we have a brand new one. Now you're going to come in here, you're going to grab this intermediate gear, and as you say, now you see stuff falling out here. We're going to grab this intermediate gear. And it should come straight up out, and you may have to help it a little because of the rollers and stuff getting in the way. But at the end of everything, here you go. Okay, a few spacers. There'll be some thrust washers. It may get dropped down in the case. Okay, there's a thrust washer. Actually, you should have two thrust washers. There's the other one. And a whole gang of rollers and a center spacer. Okay, set all this stuff over here. And as I say, there may be more down in the bottom of the case. We're going to fish down through it and find out for sure. Actually, what we're going to do is we're going to get a magnet, and we're going to go down through that case because I'm pretty certain we've probably lost some rollers down in there. So here's a little magnet. The real reason we're rebuilding it is only because of this input shaft, because the output shaft on the T176 transmission was bad, and it kind of ate up the input shaft. So we're gonna, since we're rebuilding the transmission, we're gonna go ahead and rebuild the transfer case also. Gonna freshen everything up so that this owner's not gonna have any problems with this transfer case for a long time. Now guys, this is where it helps to have a breakdown or know what it is that you're looking for. You know, we only had one of these that I could see, and I fished around through the bottom of the transfer case and couldn't find the other one. There is two of these. So I tipped the transfer case around a little bit, and all of a sudden one comes sliding out. So just be aware, guys, of what you're doing, and try to have you a breakdown, a diagram of what this thing looks like, you know, so that you know the parts that should come out of it. Okay guys, now on this Model 300, what you should have come out with that intermediate shaft, you should have, aside from the lock plate that we discussed before, you should of course have the intermediate shaft itself. You should have two end spacers for your needles. We're going to go ahead and bag this stuff up. There's one center spacer that goes in the gear for the rollers. You should have two thrust bearings or thrust washers and 48 rollers. That's 24 for each side. And that takes care of the intermediate shaft group. Okay guys, now we was getting down to a point to where I had to have a little more light here, so I went and got my headlamp. I want to show you what we got to do next. Okay, what we're going to do now is you see you have a shifting fork here. Okay, now that's going to be this is your 2- and 4-wheel drive shifting fork. This is your high and low range shifting fork. These two shifting forks here, and what we have to do is we have to loosen these. Okay, so what we got to do is you use a 3/16 Allen wrench. You get on this little set screw. You don't want to back it all the way out, but you do want to back it out several rounds because there's a pretty good indentation in there, and that you have to get the screw back out of in order to withdraw those shafts. Okay guys, now just to show you, we've got everything loosened up. As you can see the detent where the set screw does go, but we have it so that everything, the shifting fork is sliding real free, both of them on the shaft. That way we can go ahead and loosen all this up and pull the shafts and the the casting all as one unit. Now the one thing that you do have to be careful of when you're doing this is you have detent balls right in here, and you have to be careful to not pull those shafts out until you're ready to, otherwise you could lose those detent balls. Now we're going to pull this rear bearing. Now the one thing that you want to watch here is this stack of shims. Okay, you definitely want to keep these shims because these are what's going to set our bearing preload. Okay, set that back out of the way. There's our bearing race. One shifting fork. The other shifting fork. Now we're down to the point that we have to start pulling bearings. Okay guys, now here's our setup to pull this front bearing. As you can see, nothing to it. There's a bearing. Here's our gear. Here's our sliding gear. We're actually down to a point to where we've got to have we need a press, which we have one, and we'll use it. And we're going to go over here and work on this other end first. Actually, before we do that, what we're going to do is we're going to bag this stuff up. Input shaft, which is actually the reason why we had to pull this. Now we'll have to press that out of there. Spin it around and we'll pull this front, this rear output shaft. And there we go. Okay, there's our rear seal, rear bearing. And our rear bearing cone. So now all we have to do is disassemble all this stuff, which is nothing more than pulling this seal, pulling this cone, driving the two bearing cones out, and then we'll be on to getting our shafts separated. So I'm going to stop here, kind of clean up a little, disassemble what we got here, and then we'll be back. Okay guys, here we are. We got our output housing, bearing housing all cleaned up, and looks real nice. Down here is the bearings and races that came out of it, seal. I guess I really should have showed you me getting those bearing races out. It's a simple process, but it is something that you got to be careful with. Again, it's just using a brass drift. You just come in here, you'll have enough of the bearing race sticking to the inside of the housing that you can get a little bit of your punch on it, your drift, and you just get it setting up on wood blocks, of course, so you don't damage anything, and you just tap, 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 tap just all around it and work it out. Okay, it's not a hard process, but it is something you need to use a brass drift. You got to use soft tools because you don't want to damage anything. Next chore is disassembling the input shaft housing. First thing we're going to need is some snap ring pliers. We've got a snap ring here on this gear. And there we go. Snap ring. There comes our gear. Now all we are left with is we have this large ball bearing here, and we have a snap ring in it that we have to get out also. And for that we need a screwdriver. We'll see if we can get underneath this. Sometimes it takes two screwdrivers. We'll see what happens here. Yeah, I think we're going to have two screwdrivers. What you do is you use one screwdriver to pry the ring out and slightly up, and you use your other screwdriver to get underneath of it. This gets you a starting point. Then it's just a matter of peeling it out. Okay, so we'll take it back to the press and press it out. Now normally while we have our setup here, what we would do is we would go ahead and remove this bearing, but we're not going to do that for the simple reason we're replacing the whole output shaft and bearing and everything, so there's really no reason to press that off. One of the things that I noticed that I forgot to mention that we definitely don't want to forget are these shims right here. These are what shim our bearing clearance and bearing preload for our rear output shaft. Okay, so we got to have these. So put these in your bag of parts with all your rear output shaft stuff. We got our case and everything set up here in the press, and setting a socket up to use to press this gear out. And there's our shaft. Our bearing and our gear. I probably better get down here and catch it. And there we go. Our transfer case is now disassembled. Now all we have to do is clean everything up and we can begin the rebuild and assembly process. We're going to go ahead and clean our bench up because, as you can see, it definitely needs it. We're going to clean the bench up, finish cleaning our parts up, and this is going to end it for this section of the video as far as tearing it down, and we're going to continue with this section of the video when we begin the reassembly. So again, guys, this is Lucky Larry out here at K&L Machine and Welding. Hope you're having a great day, and join us on the next video.